Hello, and welcome to your citation guide. This is part 1 in text citations. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to cite correctly, let's think for a moment about why we want to cite correctly. For example, say you need some snow boots. You go to the store, you pick out some snow boots that fit you, and you pay for them. You take home the snow boots. Well, to show your acknowledgement of where the snow boots came from and the fact that you did not create them yourselves, you give the merchant money. Well, in the same way, we have to give credit to the place where we get our information when we write our essays. So paying for it is akin or like citing it correctly. So we want to, just as we don't want to rip someone off, we also don't want to rip someone off with intellectual property or with their ideas. That's another way to think of it. So, to get us started with the nitty-gritty, let's look at how to cite sources inside your paper. So this is separate from the works cited or the bibliography page. The most common way to give credit to a source is to cite the author's last name and the page number, if the source is a book, inside parentheses after the quote or the idea in your paper. Here's example 1, and this one is if there is a page number. During the missile confrontation, Kennedy received widespread international support. End quote. This is from Friedel, 366, period. So notice how the last name of the author and the page number are both there, and the period is on the outside of the parentheses. Here's another example. This is for an article that has no page number. So this article most likely came from an online source because online sources don't have page numbers. As a result of having many snow days, children are developing new methods of building snowmen. Carabel, period. So this comes from someone who also has my last name, and it just has the last name in the parentheses. Now let's look at another technique. This one is a bit more advanced and requires you to use the author's last name in your sentence. If you do that, you only put the page number in parentheses. You don't need to put the author's name again because that would be repetitive. Example 1. According to Friedel, so there's the author's name, during the missile confrontation, Kennedy received widespread international support from page 366, period. Here's another example. This one does not have a page number. According to McMahon, students are, quote, consistently challenging themselves to build creative snow people when they are out of school due to snowy weather, period, end quote. This one doesn't even have parentheses because there is no page number. All we need is the last name because this came from an online source. There could be one other little glitch. Some sources don't have an author. You may find this if you're reading an article produced by the Associated Press or an article or informational page on a website that's a more broad overview of your topic. So a source having no author is cited by the title. So to use its title, you put the title in parentheses. Example 1. Responding to ever more urgent demands, he took vigorous action in the cause of equal rights, calling for new civil rights legislation. So the quote is in quotation marks, and then the article is in parentheses and quotation marks. So this is, quote, John F. Kennedy, colon, 35th President, quotation marks, a 1 for page 1, parentheses, period. Example 2, and this one does not have a page number, and we can assume that that's because it is from an online source. Of course, iPads and snow don't mix! Exclamation point. So if there's an exclamation point or a question mark, put that in the original quote because think of that as part of the meaning of the quote, so it should stay with it. But then we still have parentheses, quotation marks. This article was called Best iPad Cases of 2014, quotation marks, because we put quotation marks around articles, just as we do around stories, parentheses, period. So you can see there's a period and there is an exclamation point. This, again, it only happens if there's an exclamation point or a question mark in the original quote. So a few reminders. Do begin the parenthetical citation one space after the material is cited. So, for example, don't squeeze the parentheses right up next to the quotation mark. That would be difficult to read. Do place a period after the parentheses at the end of the sentence. Don't use any abbreviation for page numbers. Don't write P or PP or page or the number sign, nothing, just the page number. You can assume that people know what that means. And don't use any punctuation between the author's name and the page or between the title of the work and the page. So again, no extra spaces, just enough to keep everything clear. Now we're going to transition to the second type of citing, and this is the works cited page. So the very important thing about this is that whatever you put in the parentheses when you cited up above, what we just talked about, that will be the first thing that goes in your bibliography or your works cited page. So a few tips on formatting the works cited page, which is just a list of all the sources that you've cited or that you have paraphrased from. So you type works cited about 1 inch down. You leave one blank line after the title, and then you double space just like you did the rest of your paper. You do have to do some sorting, however. You should put your entries in alphabetical order by the author's last name. However, if there's no author, like we already talked about, then put the work according to the first word of the title. But, of course, there's an exception. If the first word of the title is a, an, or the, which are articles, then you alphabetize by the second word. Again, this is important. The first part of the works cited entry should correspond to what you have written in the parentheses in your in-text citations. Why? Because it makes it easy for someone to use your works cited page. Essentially, what you put in parentheses is the most important part of the citation, so that is why it goes first on the works cited page. Here's an example. And here's how to cite electronic sources with some examples. First comes the editor, author, or compiler name if that is available. You'll notice that a lot of the information about citing electronic sources will say if something is available. That's because electronic sources are all organized differently. It's not like we can just turn to the title page like we can for a book. So after the editor, author, or compiler name, then period, then title of the article, if it's there, and the name of the site, if it's there, and or the name of the institution or the organization affiliated with the site. So if there's an organization that sponsors it, then put that there. So this is an organization that may have sponsored the site. Then you put a comma, then the date that the resource was created, if this was available. You put the word web to show that you got this from an electronic source, period, and then the date that you accessed it. That's important because when things are online, they change. And so the day you accessed it can be very important, especially if the content has changed. So here are a couple examples. How to make vegetarian chili from eHow. And so how to make vegetarian chili is the title. eHow is the name of the site. Demand Media is the institution or organization that sponsors it. It came from the web and it was accessed on 24 February 2009. So note the format, the date, the month, and then the year. Here's another example. The Purdue OWL family of sites. This is from the Purdue Online Writing Lab, which is where I got some of this information. So that is the name of the site. The name of the organization is the Writing Lab and OWL at Purdue and Purdue University, and comma 2008, which means it was created in 2008, web, and accessed on 23 April 2008. So a few last reminders. Do italicize book, magazine, newspaper, videos, film, and film strip titles. Put quotation marks around the titles of articles from magazines, newspapers, and anthologies. Put a period at the end of each entry, and do not number the entries. Remember, they go in alphabetical order. The end.